Hello and welcome to lecture number 48. The topic today is 5.6, the failure of compromise. The theme is politics and power. The learning objective today is explain the political causes of the Civil War. The first of two key concepts says the courts and national leaders made a variety of attempts to resolve the issue of slavery in the territories, including the Kansas-Nebraska Act and the Dred Scott decision, but these ultimately failed to reduce conflict. The Kansas-Nebraska Act was a piece of legislation that would organize the territories of Kansas and Nebraska so that they could begin their pathway to statehood. It was proposed by Stephen Douglas, the senator from Illinois, with the intent to build the Trans-Pacific Railroad route to go through those territories. This proposed Trans-Pacific Railroad would begin in Chicago, Illinois, a large part of Douglas's motivation. However, these two territories were north of the Missouri Compromise line. Southern states would not allow the addition of two free states without some concessions. So written into the law, the states of Kansas and Nebraska could decide in their constitutions if they would allow slavery within their boundaries. It basically throws out the previous Missouri Compromise and Compromise of 1850 out the window by introducing a new process of determining the spread of slavery, popular sovereignty. This gets a lot of pro-slavery and anti-slavery supporters to move into the territory of Kansas to influence the outcome, and violence breaks out. John Brown, the radical abolitionist, is one such person to rush to Kansas, and after some pro-slavery forces killed anti-slavery supporters in Lawrence, Kansas, John Brown carries out revenge. At Pottawatomie Creek, Brown and his forces murder 5 pro-slavery supporters. The bottom picture on the screen is a mural in the Kansas state capitol of John Brown entering into the Kansas territory during its chaotic founding. The federal government's response to the Kansas violence was non-existent. President Pierce does not do anything, doesn't send federal troops. The pro-slavery and anti-slavery sides in Congress are riled up about this. Senator Charles Sumner, a Republican from Massachusetts, spoke out against the violence and the inaction of the government. He made a speech in the Senate and called out some of his fellow senators in his speech for their capitulation to slavery and the slavery interests. He says, "The senator from South Carolina has read many books of chivalry and believes himself a chivalrous knight, with sentiments of honor and courage. Of course he has chosen a mistress to whom he has made vows, and who, though ugly to others, is always lovely to him. Though polluted in the sight of the world, is chaste in his sight. I mean the harlot, slavery." He's personally attacking his senator from South Carolina. That senator's nephew was a Democrat in the House of Representatives, Preston Brooks. In order to defend his uncle's honor, Representative Brooks goes into the Senate chamber and mauls Senator Charles Sumner with his cane, while Sumner is seated at his desk. Preston Brooks beats Sumner, and Sumner can't get away because he gets stuck in between his desk and chair. This incident is referred to as Bleeding Sumner. The Southern response to this was to send Representative Brooks new canes because he broke his own during the beating. The Republican and Northern reaction to this was outrage. They could not believe that violence like this could have broken out in the nation's legislature. As far as Kansas was concerned, there were 2 constitutions that were written, one that was a pro-slavery constitution and one that was an anti-slavery constitution. The Lecompton Constitution is the pro-slavery one, named after the city of Lecompton, where the pro-slavery forces were centered. In 1857, President Buchanan urges Congress to approve it, to be done with the issue, but Congress ends up rejecting it. The Kansas-Nebraska issue will stay unresolved through the 1860s. The Dred Scott decision, which was another incident that made people in the North outraged by what pro-slavery forces were willing to do. Dred Scott was a formerly enslaved person who had sued for his freedom, based on having been transported to free territory by his enslaver. His case goes all the way up to the Supreme Court. At that point, Chief Justice Roger Taney, who had been appointed by Andrew Jackson, makes 2 major decisions in the case. First, Scott has no standing to sue since he's not a U.S. citizen. This has happened before when John Marshall heard a case, Cherokee Nation versus Georgia, in which he said that the Cherokee didn't have standing to sue since they were not U.S. citizens, and in that scenario, he dismissed the case altogether. Roger Taney, instead of following Marshall's precedent, makes the decision despite the case having no standing. He says that enslaved people, in the eyes of the U.S. Constitution, were property. Since Congress cannot deprive citizens of property without due process based on the Fifth Amendment, Dred Scott could not have gained his freedom by merely stepping into free territory. As a result of that, the Missouri Compromise was now unconstitutional, because Congress could not create a line that marked where citizens could lose their property by stepping across it. Put simply, it technically made slavery legal everywhere. The decision was the first definitive answer to the slavery question by the federal government, and it came down on the side of the pro-slavery supporters. Taney's racist view of black enslaved people certainly shaped his ruling, as he fails to see their humanity, and much less their equality, in this excerpt from the decision. They had for more than a century before been regarded as beings of an inferior order, and altogether unfit to associate with the white race, either in social or political relations, and so far inferior that they had no rights which the white man was bound to respect, and that the Negro might justly and lawfully be reduced to slavery for his benefit. The second key concept says the second party system ended when the issue of slavery and anti-immigrant nativism weakened loyalties to the two major parties and fostered the emergence of sectional parties, most notably the Republican Party in the North. The Whig Party is the one that dies out, bringing an end of the second party system. The last presidential election that they ran in was in 1852. They ran Winfield Scott, who had been a general during the Mexican-American War, against Democrat Franklin Pierce. The Whig Party, through all of its life, had tried to avoid the issue of slavery in their platform because they were trying to appeal to as many people as possible. They knew that the issue of slavery was going to divide their support, but the party ends up dissipating because they finally have to start taking a stance on slavery, and that divides their support in the South. Southern Whigs will join the Democratic Party because they're angry that Northern Whigs are anti-slavery, while Northern Whigs are going to join either the Know Nothing Party, the Free Soil Party, or the new Republican Party that's formed in 1854. The Democratic Party, despite surviving this period of sectionalism, also had problems of their own. The unity of the party is compromised after the Kansas-Nebraska Act. The Southern Democrats were happy that Kansas and Nebraska could now possibly be slave states. The Northern Democrats were angry that slavery might spread northward. In the 1856 election, in order to try and keep the issue of slavery out of center stage, the Democrats chose James Buchanan as their presidential candidate. Buchanan had been an ambassador to the UK and had been away from the country fulfilling those duties. Since he was seen as more neutral on the issue, he was a compromise candidate to try and unify the party, and ultimately won. Stephen Douglas, the same senator from Illinois who had introduced the Kansas-Nebraska Act into Congress, is the last major national figure in the party. However, he is very divisive, as evidenced by the Kansas-Nebraska Act. He further strained the party during his 1858 re-election campaign for the Senate, in which he faced off against Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln and Douglas engaged in a series of debates across the state in the lead-up to the election. Slavery kept coming up as a topic, and Stephen Douglas had to reconcile his generally negative position on slavery with the recent Dred Scott decision that said that slavery could be legal everywhere. He tries to appease the Northern Democrats that don't want slavery to be legal everywhere, and appease the Southern Democrats that do want slavery to be present everywhere, with his own position of popular sovereignty. In the debate that took place in the city of Freeport, he comes up with this idea that's technically popular sovereignty as a possible answer to the slavery question. He walks through his logic saying that even though slavery is technically legal everywhere, it can only be supported by local laws. This is the Freeport Doctrine. It acknowledges that yes, slavery will be legal everywhere in the United States, but if a local government or state government does not want to enforce slavery, then it doesn't have to. It won't be forced by the federal government to do so. This appeases Northern Democrats, but it makes Southern Democrats really angry since it's a concession to the North after they had thought that they had won the slavery debate. The Republican Party was formed in Wisconsin in 1854. They run their first presidential election in 1856, and when they write that platform, they explicitly call for the repeal of the Kansas and Nebraska Act. They want to repeal the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 as well. Anti-slavery positions are central to the Republican Party platform from the very beginning. John Fremont, another general from the Mexican-American War, is chosen as their presidential candidate in 1856. He receives about a third of the popular vote, which is really good for a brand new party that's only been around for 2 years. But it is limited to the North. It is a purely sectional party. They win 11 of the 16 northern states, and in 1856 they realized that given that the northern states have a larger population, if a Republican candidate were able to win all of the northern states, then they would have a real shot at winning the presidency. In 1858, Abraham Lincoln rose to prominence because of the Lincoln-Douglas debates. Stephen Douglas was the most famous politician in the country, while Abraham Lincoln was a one-term representative from the state of Illinois with very little name recognition. But since he so masterfully debated against Stephen Douglas in that campaign, he becomes a rising star within the Republican Party. By 1860, he is the nominee for the Republican Party for president. In those debates, he pointed out that the position of the Republican Party as wholly being against slavery. He said, "The sentiment that contemplates the institution of slavery in this country as a wrong is the sentiment of the Republican Party. They look upon it as being a moral, social, and political wrong." It was in these debates that he also gave his famous House Divided speech, foreshadowing dark times ahead. Even though Lincoln won the rhetorical battle in these debates, he ultimately lost the electoral battle. However, Douglas and Lincoln face off once again in the 1860 presidential election with a different outcome. Alright, finally here's the recap. Attempts at resolving the issue of slavery made the problem worse and increased tension between North and South. Roger Taney was the absolute worst. He created a legal precedent that said that African Americans were not to be treated like citizens, and that they were never intended by the Founding Fathers to be citizens. It will take the Civil War and the 13th and 14th and 15th Amendments to overturn that decision. The Whig Party breaks up because it never dealt with the issue of slavery properly. The Democratic Party is straining over the issue of slavery. The Republican Party is created by Free Soilers, Whigs, and Northern Democrats. And finally, Stephen Douglas's ambitions continue to backfire. Thank you for watching. If you would like to watch the next lecture, you can click on the video link on the screen, and if you're looking for more practice to help you on the AP exam, you can visit apushslides.com. I wish you the very best in all of your studying, and look forward to seeing you back on the next lecture.